So let's talk about the differences in children with regards to immune function and how those systems work versus an adult's system. So first of all, we know our immune system's job is to really eliminate foreign substances as effectively as possible. It keeps us healthy. And our immune system, when triggered by a foreign substance, produces antibodies or proteins that work against the antigens, the foreign substance that triggers that immune response. It also produces T lymphocytes and these natural killer cells. So there are two types of immunity that we develop. First of all, natural immunity. And natural immunity is comprised of the defenses that we get at birth, such as skin, body pH, natural antibodies from the mother, which will stay with the child for quite some time. Acquired immunity consists of that antibody-mediated and cell-mediated immunity. And that immunity is not fully developed until the child reaches approximately the age of 6 years. That is why in young children under the age of 7 years, they will be sick more frequently. They don't have a mature and fully developed immune system as of yet. So let's talk about humoral immunity. That's responsible for destroying bacterial antigens that are introduced. B lymphocytes are produced in that bone marrow. They're also produced in your gut and other lymphoid tissue, and they are the central factors that make up humoral immunity. Those develop into cells that produce antibodies. And antibodies equal any type of immunoglobulin. And we find those in serum and in body fluids and in certain tissues in our bodies. So our primary immune response occurs when a child is first exposed to an antigen or a foreign body is introduced to the system. These B lymphocyte systems begin to produce antibodies that react specifically to that specific antigen that was introduced. This process of developing those antibodies takes approximately 3 days. And what happens then from that first exposure, subsequent encounters with that same antigen trigger a memory in those cells. And we respond with a secondary immune response as a result of that. So our bodies essentially remember those exposures and can fight those exposures. So how is a child's immunity different? I had mentioned in the beginning here that children under the age of 6 or 6 and under really don't have fully developed immune systems. So IgG is the only immunoglobulin that crosses the placenta. So in utero, they will get IgG, and those levels at birth are about the same as the mother's level of IgG. So they have high levels of the mom's immunity IgG for about 6 to 8 months after birth. Eventually, that infant IgG increases and gradually takes over, but does not reach those mature levels until about the age of 7 or 8. So normal values of most of the other immunoglobulins aren't reached until 7 years at least. So between the IgG that is not fully developed and the mother's levels of IgG have dropped off, and all the other immunoglobulin levels that are developing, those all don't come together to reach mature levels until the child reaches approximately 7 years of age. So immunity doesn't reach its full function until early on in childhood, and thus many kids get sicker and sicker than they do when they're older because they don't have the ability to fight infection. Cell-mediated immunity achieves full function very early in life. So the thymus begins producing T lymphocytes in the fetus, and by birth these cells are present. The thymus, the tonsils, and lymph node tissue are larger in children. So that's where a lot of those T lymphocytes are focused, and we do notice those larger in children, and they do decrease in size over time. So newborns are infants are most prone to the development of infections, especially if they're born prematurely. We know that they don't have fully developed immunity, and of course, premature infants have even lower levels of that immunity. So their immune protection response is very, very low. What we do know is that human milk or breast milk contains a lot of immunologic components. And that can trigger an immune response in the infant and really has a great protection against infection for infants. So breast milk is a big positive in terms of immune response, and especially in a premature infant where we can give the infant mother's breast milk, that really will enhance the immunology and the immunologic system in a premature infant. So let's take a look at some of the infection control measures we need to remember for use with children who are diagnosed with an immunodeficiency. And in general, remember, all children under the age of 7 are considered immune system weaker. So all of these are good control measures that we should be thinking about. So first of all, as you can imagine, we want to do all we can to prevent the spread of infection, and that often takes place via standard precautions and hand washing techniques using transmission-based precautions. So if we know there is a specific organism around, we can certainly institute precautions that will help protect from that particular organism. Additionally, we want to teach parents to keep their children out of contact with infectious individuals. We do definitely want them to get vaccine administration, and we want to make sure that family members around them are getting vaccine administration as well to protect everyone. We want to maintain any skin integrity because certainly we don't want to create a port of entry for other types of infectious materials. And it's always important to make sure these kids are getting adequate fluid and nutrition in order to improve growth and development and keep them as healthy as possible through those means.